Welcome to this new series of Talking Truth, and today we are joined by Paul Coxall, Stephen Grant, Graham Stannard, Ian Proud, and myself, Alasdair MacPherson. And today, and this whole series, is going to be on the subject of idolatry. We have been reading a book by Tim Keller called Counterfeit Gods, recommended by you, Stephen.
Yes, recommended by me.
And I think we would all say it's been an excellent book, and if you get the chance to read it, we would recommend that. But really the book is to kind of help us talk about a biblical concept, which is spiritual idolatry. So let's maybe first of all, let's define terms. So how would we define idolatry?
I think we would say straight away that anything can be an idol. I'm not sure whether I'm quoting from the book when I say this, but anything that we sacrifice rightful relationships for could be classed as an idol.
Okay.
Yeah, I think anything what is our ultimate goal, what provides us the ultimate satisfaction, we think, and security in life, what we'll chase after, can be an idol.
Yeah, I suppose if we're thinking though, when we talk about idolatry, what's the first thing that would come into our mind?
The first thing that would come in would be a god or a replacement for God, something that would have a religious connotation.
Yeah.
So you might think about more, different from Western societies, you would think about historically idols being physical manifestations of deities that people would worship and revere.
Yeah, and if you go back to the Ten Commandments, that you shall have no other gods before me, and you don't make any graven image, so you don't bow down to a particular. And obviously, when people think about the subject of idolatry, that's what's in their minds. It's the idea of making obeisance to some kind of a statue or whatever.
Yes.
But obviously, Keller in his book is pointing out the biblical truth that idolatry is more, and you've talked about it. Does anybody else want to add to that kind of modern day kind of application?
In the West, we don't live so much in a religious society, so idolatry manifests itself in the worship of things that might not seem overtly religious, but can be worshipped just like in a religious way. So, for example, instead of going to a church and spending your money and your time and revering the things within a church system, you can do the same somewhere else.
Yeah, I think
Because a sporting context would be one, following a football team. Not as wrong, as necessary to follow a football team, but that can become, for example, idolatrous. Almost your place of worship is the football stadium, and something like that. That's an example of how something which is good and can be enjoyed, perhaps, can become an idol because that absorbs all your attention and your focus in life.
I remember, I was going to say that, I think in the football, like West Coast of Scotland, it's very much a kind of a worship issue. Because I remember hearing somebody say, I'll not say which Old Firm team it was, but they would die for their team. And it's like, okay, that's ultimate worship of their team. Sorry, Ian, you were going to say?
But it becomes an ultimate thing, doesn't it? I mean, how the weekend goes is determined upon how a football result goes. That's reality in the West Coast, and perhaps every football follower, not every football follower, but if it becomes an idol, then the result depends upon how you feel, and that's an awful thing.
But I think idols as well, Keller points out, I think, that not just being things outside of yourself, like a team or we're usually football teams, it's such an obvious thing to see, but there are more subtle versions of this that affect everybody.
Yeah, so for example, Paul writes in Colossians chapter 3 verse 5 that greed is idolatry. Now that could be greed for all sorts of things. It could be greed for power, greed for position, greed for prestige, greed for food. All those things can be idols.
Yeah, and obviously when John is writing his first epistle, he's going to say at the very end of his epistle, little children, keep yourself from idols. So that's interesting because it's helping us see that idolatry is not purely a thing that a non-Christian does when they worship a false god. It's actually an issue that Christians need to be aware of.
Yes.
Because we also, whilst still worshipping the God, we can worship other things as well as that they can take the place of.
We can allow those things to take the place of God in our lives.
Yeah. So would you say then that that kind of idolatry is more subtle? That worship of a statue is a very obvious thing,
It's very overt.
whereas these things are much more subtle and can grip us without us realizing.
Yes. And I think when Ezekiel talks about that, even in the nation of Israel, they have taken idols into their hearts. So the heart idolatry. And I think there we're getting at the nub of the matter. I wanted to read a passage to kind of, in James chapter 4. And part of the reason for this is because I can remember hearing and reading books that talked about spiritual idolatry. And it was coming from American authors. And so my natural question was, is this just some kind of, are they going over the top? Are they making an application that the Bible doesn't make? Are they just using kind of spiritual language to overemphasize a point? And I suppose it was when I was studying in James chapter 4 that helped me understand that, okay, what we're dealing with here is spiritual idolatry is a biblical issue. So it might just be helpful to turn to that passage. Now, obviously, the context of James 4 is conflict within a Christian community. He says, where do fights and wars come from? And then he says this, do they not come from your desires for pleasure that war in your members? So here is an unbiblical desire. It's a sinful desire because it's at war within our body. So again, when Paul writes to the Galatians, he talks about the flesh and the spirit being at war with each other, and that's all taking place within our bodies as our bodies desire and crave for different things. But there's a really interesting kind of development of the argument here. He says, you lust and do not have. And here it's a different word and it's a different context, because the word here for lust, now we often use the word lust in a negative connotation, often with a sexual connotation, but the word is just strong desire. And Paul actually uses the same word in 1 Timothy for desiring the work of an overseer. So there the desire is entirely good and righteous. But here the context is this desire for something has taken place, and the believers, they don't have it. Now, you can speculate as to what that was. There was rich and there was poor in the community that James is writing to, and therefore it may have been for material possessions, that there was a desire to be rich. But again, we're speculating, and it's interesting that there's no reference to what it is, because what it is in the context of the conflict is unimportant. That what's important is the level of desire that has been attached to it. So they have this strong desire for something that they haven't been given, and all through that we recognize that God is sovereign, that God either chooses to give us something or chooses to withhold something. But what is very interesting is that James here says that you are adulterers and adulteresses. Now, obviously, in the original, it's just the feminine, so it's you adulteresses. Now, that's important because these believers that are being written to, they are converted Jews. So, therefore, they understand the context of spiritual adultery because it was when Israel worshipped other gods. So, firmly in the mind here is that when a desire has become too strong, it is spiritual adultery, or we could use the term spiritual idolatry. So I think it was Luther that said when a good thing becomes an ultimate thing, it becomes a wicked thing. And I think that's what's going on here. There's a desire for something, and that desire might be for something entirely righteous. It's not unrighteous to want to be comfortable in life. It's not wrong to want to have money. Those desires are not wrong, but when those desires take an ultimate place in our heart, it becomes a wicked thing. It becomes spiritual idolatry. So therefore, when I was looking at this, I'm thinking, okay, so the whole issue of spiritual idolatry is not just a modern American thing. it's an entirely biblical thing, and therefore it's not surprising that all through church history you've got, whether it's Luther at the Reformation or whether it's the Puritans, the Puritans talk so much about this, that our affections and guarding our hearts and our heart's affections, because from that come all the problems of life, which is what Solomon says.
Yes, yeah.
So anyway.
I just thought it was really interesting, that passage you referred to in James 4, because it links this whole question ultimately with murder and covetousness. It talks about the fact that you desire, do not have, so you murder, you covet and cannot obtain, so you fight and quarrel. And I was thinking, as I was thinking about this, I was thinking about David in the Old Testament, who was a man after God's own heart. So he was a believer, the equivalent of a Christian today, but he had desires in his heart that he wanted to fulfill, which resulted in murder and stealing, and you're breaking a lot of the commandments. So I think he's an example of how that somebody who is a believer, a true believer, can actually be caught up in a form of idolatry.
And sorry, just on that particular point, I think that when James talks about you murder, that people might think, well, I'm nowhere near that. So obviously I'm not an idolater because I don't actually want to take the life of another individual. But in Matthew 6, the Lord Jesus connects the issue of anger, unrighteous anger, with murder. So I think that when we have unrighteous anger, we are guilty of murdering in our heart a fellow brother or whoever, and therefore it's idolatry. Sorry,
I'm just going to say, I mean, the book has been very, very helpful. It's a tremendous challenge, isn't it? In the sense that a man after God's own heart arrived at murdering Uriah, committing adultery with Bathsheba, and that didn't start there. Although he was not where he ought to have been, he should have been fighting. But that began way back when he took Abigail and the other, I can't remember the name of the other lady, as wives. And so this whole thing began not necessarily on that night, but there was things that went beforehand, and so we've got to guard our hearts.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, a good test is what is an idol. What are we prepared to do to achieve that? Isn't it? To in our pursuit of this, and that's what we see in this book. In James here, don't we? You're prepared to murder.
Yeah.
And obviously, it's not, as you rightly said, not very few of us would literally do that, but in our pursuit of this goal that we have, which has become an idol, we are prepared to sin to get that. We'll sin to get that. That's in our pursuit of it.
And I think it's also helpful to understand how prolific this issue is. Again, I think it's Luther that says that our hearts are idol-making factories. And we are so prone to having affections for anything other than God, that we will very quickly attach an affection for something. And that isn't always wanting something. It may also be the avoidance of something.
Sure.
That we want to avoid a certain type of experience or situation, so therefore we will sin in order to avoid that. So I think that when we read in the Bible about the human heart, sometimes I think as Christians the tendency is to think, okay, that's talking about the person who's not yet saved, and that's their heart, that they desire all these different evil things. But when Paul writes those in lots of the epistles, when he's talking about the problem of the human heart, he's writing to Christians, because the issue is in each one of us.
Yeah, well, the flesh still remains, doesn't it, within us, as we know. So there's that constant battle. And I think, as Keller said and others have said, idols can be often good things, but we've put them to that ultimate place, haven't we, in pursuit of that.
Yeah, the good things become God things.
Well, that's exactly right.
Yeah. So part of what Keller does is he talks about why they are so appealing. So we've touched on this already, because obviously our hearts are responding to something. But is there any other kind of factors within that what makes counterfeit gods so appealing?
One of the things is they draw attention to self, whereas when we worship the true God, everything is focused on Him and not on self. And we all have within us a desire to focus on self. Natural desire.
a lot of idols are good things. And, you know, husbands, love your wives. It's right to love your wives unconditionally. It's right to work hard for the glory of God, you know, not as eye pleasers, but do all things as unto the Lord. And so it's very easy for these good things to be hard-working, faithful, dutiful, to be a loving husband, and that these things then become an ultimate thing. And it's very good practice for us all to analyse our hearts on a very regular basis.
Yeah. I think that, as you're both saying, that the problem in us is that we want to be our own God. And we live in a culture today which is very much, it's all about the idol of self. Everything is focused on self. And children are encouraged, in our Western world anyway, they are their own idol. And I think you can probably contrast that with our more Eastern way of thinking, where the family is more the prime thing. But for us, it's a very individualistic thing. You can't tell me what to do. And children are told their rights, they're encouraged to exert their rights, and it's all about you being your own God in the centre of your universe. But as we will see, I think, through a number of the different talks that we hope to do, that how destructive that kind of pathway is.
Yes, we saw someone with a tattoo recently, someone who would claim to be a believer in Christ, and the tattoo was, "I am worthy." And that is clearly, totally anti-biblical. I am not worthy.
Yeah.
It's Christ who is worthy, and I find my worth only in him.
Yeah. I think the other thing that's interesting about it is that we're very blind to that, because as you, I think, said earlier on, this form of spiritual idolatry is so insidious that therefore it's very difficult sometimes to spot when it's in your own heart. So is there any other kind of things that you would recognise from culture and how culture would reinforce?
Well, our whole culture usually is an expression, it grows out of, it doesn't come from nowhere. And it usually over time, adapts from people. Culture is created by people. And so our culture that we live in has kind of morphed over time, has developed over time. But the essential elements of what we would call modern culture are pretty much the same as they've always been. The technology changes, travel changes, all that kind of thing changes. But actually the human heart remains just the same. And that has been historically, you can see that. There is what comes to the surface is not pretty in the human heart. And so, wars are fought, society finds itself with challenges and its brokenness, dealing with all sorts of social issues, lack of harmony, breakdown in the sort of structure of family, and all that kind of stuff that leads to problems in people's lives that finds expressions in different ways nowadays. All of that, I think that the brokenness of our culture is actually causing people to find within themselves an emptiness and a desire for significance and identity and meaning. And perhaps that doesn't always cause people to worship God, but a yearning to worship something. And to find significance in something. And so that finds expression in the worship of all sorts of things. And the Christian's desire is to worship God, and for others to find that significance and value in worshipping the true God as well.
Yeah.
We'll chase after what will give significance and satisfaction in life, what will provide that for us. And if we don't look to God, who will truly provide ultimate significance and ultimate satisfaction, we'll be pursuing something else, whatever that might be.
And I think that some of the brokenness and emptiness in society today that is so evident, it comes from the dissatisfaction and disillusionment that people have in the worship of idols.
Yes.
So it leaves people ultimately empty in the big significant areas of life. I mean, it will satisfy to some extent. To take the frivolous, it's not frivolous to some, but if you go back to the football analogy, there's great satisfaction for a lot of folk in that, especially if your team's winning. But in the kind of fellowship and camaraderie of that, and all the enjoyable aspects round about it. But ultimately, in the big serious issues of life, things like that don't actually provide an answer for the big issues of life. So I think a lot of that, the culture facilitates a superficial satisfaction, but not a deep rooted.
I think that it's also important to recognise the fact that as individuals, every person in this world has been created by God, and they've been created to worship. So therefore, we will always be worshipping something or someone.
Who is it about the God-centred? Augustine, or was it?
I think it was, yeah. It was Augustine. It was Augustine.
That whole which only God truly can fill, isn't it? And someone,
made into a popular song.
Yeah.
But
was it? I don't know.
A God-shaped hole in our heart.
Okay.
But the point is that we are always, as you were saying, that we're always looking for that meaning and purpose. And if we're not finding it in God, we will find it in something.
What's interesting nowadays with amongst ourselves, been chatting about surveys and things that have been done recently, and there seems to be a desire in a rising generation to go back to searching for fulfillment in the spiritual, and not discount that, as perhaps as our previous generation did. Yeah. And that's leading to, particularly amongst a younger generation, some of the statistics are quite startling about people seeking after satisfaction and fulfillment in the spiritual.
That's a really important thing for us as we seek to witness to people. That we understand who they are, that they all are seeking for something or someone, and that the idols, that whatever they're pursuing cannot ultimately satisfy, and that's kind of self-evident. And we've got a tremendous gospel to proclaim and to teach, that there is one who satisfies. It's the Lord God himself, and I think that's important for ourselves to have this understanding as we are witnessing for people.
So there's a lot of the old, Graham, there's a lot of the biblical narrative about idols, which is mainly the Old Testament, in terms of volume. Is there instruction there to take that and to apply it into a modern context?
I think so. I think that these things that were written for our learning. So you maybe have to be careful about how you apply it, that you're not doing an injustice to New Testament teaching. But in broad principles, that you see that constant battle within Israel as it's in a foreign land surrounded by nations that worship other gods. The temptation is always to copy that kind of behaviour.
They seem to be attracted to it.
Yes.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. What I was thinking was that the recent part of the conversation, we've been focusing on a non-believer and the fact that they might be seeking something different. You're seeking to find a true God to worship, or say a true God to worship, or a God to worship. But we're also thinking about the pressure of idolatry on believers. And what I'm thinking, which is a very obvious thing, is social media, that there is a danger, for example, to look at a celebrity and for believers to be tempted to want to look like a celebrity, as an example. And you get people doctoring their photos and so on, or getting the right angles and so on, just so they can look right. And it's about how they look. Or it might be about money. And we'll come to that in more detail later on in our sessions. But all these things can affect believers.
Yeah. Yes, the mindset, again, slipping into the mindset there, you say, of that person who's thinking, well, if I look a certain way, life will be more fulfilling, more satisfying.
I'll be more accepted, perhaps.
Yes, that whatever you're looking for.
Or you get more stuff.
Yeah, there could be more stuff, yes.
Persona you want.
More friends, if I got that, then life will be more fulfilling. A friend, yeah, absolutely. That sort of comfort, control, security is what people want.
It might be helpful just to help map out what the future episodes are going to be, because we want to look in more detail at some of these specific types of idols. So, Graham, you're going to be looking at...
I'm going to be looking at the pursuit of happiness.
Okay, and then Paul, you're
I'm looking at money.
money,
Yeah.
and then Ian,
Success.
and then obviously we're going to round up. Stephen, you're going to think
we're going to think about how to identify more specifically the idols within our own heart and how to find and replace them.
Yeah.
Which will be closely taken from Keller's book that I found so helpful.
Yeah. And it's maybe just helpful just at the end of this particular episode just to talk about identifying idols just briefly. I think we've all talked about guarding our hearts. So, but at the same time, our hearts are deceitful, desperately wicked. Who can know it? So therefore, in that kind of a context, how is it that we could ever possibly identify idols? Some of the things that we maybe mentioned very briefly.
I think, what absorbs my heart and imagination is where does my mind go to in times when I'm free to think of things? What am I then what am I thinking about in my mind? What move and attracts me that I give attention to?
Yeah, what would I never give up?
Yeah, that's a good phrase, isn't it? What would I never give up?
What do I spend my money on?
Yeah.
What do I invest my time in?
Yeah. And I think that for me, the key thing is when a good thing becomes an ultimate thing. That's when it's morphed from a good and healthy desire to a idolatrous desire. And I think that as you were talking, Ian, about the fact that that can be good things like loving your wife or loving your children, and you have an example of that in Abraham and his love for Isaac. And yet how those good and healthy things can become very idolatrous.
Yeah.
And so it's not, sometimes we like to kind of compartmentalize and say, well, if we desire that, then that's a bad thing. So that's an idol.
How does this impact my relationship with God?
Yeah.
Does it enhance it or does it diminish it?
Yeah. And again, it's probably one of the most contestedly kind of interpretations in the Bible. But
This is from James 4 again.
Yeah, James 4, verse 6, the Spirit who dwells in us yearns jealously. So it's the question, I have taken that it's God.
Well, God is jealous.
Yes, exactly.
He's a jealous, he says himself repeatedly in the Bible, I'm a jealous God.
Yeah.
I demand the affections, which we don't like that language, but that's God's language.
And again, that's not improper for God, because God is God. We are dependent creatures. It's entirely right for us to worship him, and it's entirely right for him to be jealous of our infections.
And that's in our best interests as well.
Absolutely.
It's not a jealousy as we sometimes think
It's not
of it.
destructive.
No, exactly. It's what's best for us.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful thing as well. Absolutely. Think of the eternal, almighty, self-existent, holy God wanting a relationship with the likes of you and I. It's an incredible thing. What a gift.
Who is the giver of all good things, but we shouldn't make these good things, as we've said already, the idols. Get things in order in our life. Check our hearts to see what is in order. Love our wives, love our families, and all other things we might enjoy. But God is the giver of all good things to us, and he is above all.
And I think that I'm very interested when we get to your particular episode, Stephen, when we think about how do we not just identify, but how do we deal with idolatry? Because again, you can think about I think an example we have in the Old Testament is the kings would often grind the idol, smash it to pieces, put it in the brick kidron, and all those kind of things. But that wouldn't have been sufficient. It was about the repairing of the altar of the Lord. And it's about the replacing of our worship of other gods with the worship of the one true living God.
Because we will delve into this to think about how creating a vacuum in your heart and affection is not the idea. So as you say, there has to be the positive that replaces the negative in that sense. But we'll come to that.
Yeah.
I think Keller talks about this, but the gospel does at least two things. It offers a solution to our failures in Christ's sacrifice, but it also offers us a totally fulfilled life. Jesus said, John 10, verse 10, I came that they might have life and that they might have it abundantly to the full.
And this, I think you were saying as well, Paul, this This is not destructive. This is not an evil thing. This is entirely not just what is right and glorifying for God. It's actually what's in our best interest.
Yes.
And all of the destructive aspects of modern living are because of the fact that our culture is seeking for gods in the wrong place.
Correct.
And if men and women, young people, if they're willing to find their all in God himself, how much of a greater blessing life would be. And that may not mean that life will be easy.
No.
But there will be a true sense of just relationship.
Ultimate satisfaction.
Yeah.
So the Thessalonian Christians, who were an example church, people have said, what does Paul say about them? 1 Thessalonians 1 verse 9, they turn to God from idols to serve and worship, of editing and worship, the living and true God.
Yeah. And I think hopefully that kind of sets up our discussions for the future episodes, where we'll probably deal in more detail with the different areas and then ultimately look at the worship of God and how that plays and how the gospel is so central to this. But I hope that for those listening, this has been helpful, and that it really helps identify what is, it's not just an issue, but really it's the issue that we face in life today. So thank you very much.